As I said before, I loved the King of the Monsters soundtrack by McCreary. I love it with all my heart. It's an absolute pleasure to listen to from beginning to end. I celebrate Bear's entire catalog, from Freaky to The Last Voyage of the Demeter, but King of the Monsters is absolutely in my top 5 soundtracks of all time. So bottom line, I worship at the Shrine of Bear. The GVK soundtrack was done by Tom Holkenborg, otherwise known as Junkie XL, and I'm not a huge fan of his work, but I do enjoy some tracks he's produced. And before GVK came out, they announced that they'd be releasing 2 tracks in advance, the new Godzilla and Kong themes, and I was hyped. I stayed up extra late on a school night just so I could listen to it as soon as humanly possible. And that was my first preview of how disappointing this movie would be. Now, in all fairness, most of the soundtrack isn't that bad, it's just kind of bland. Something that kind of bugs me about it is that it's all synth, though. Even when it's supposed to sound orchestral, it's a synth orchestra. King of the Monsters had a full orchestra, and they made it known. And this feels like such a downgrade. And I'm not entirely against synth. I love many synth soundtracks, but only when they're done well, like basically anything from Spider-Verse. There's really only one point in GVK where I think the synth is really done well. While on the surface world most of the soundtrack is the orchestral synth, it's not always consistent, but Kong's theme specifically features a melody and pan flute, which sounds pretty nice. But once they venture down into the Hollow Earth, the soundtrack starts playing with a more standard 80s style synth. And when Kong arrives at the ancient throne, claims his axe, and basically finds his new home, they play Kong's pan flute theme in the 80s synth style. It's a nice little thematic thing, but that's the only truly interesting part of the soundtrack. The rest of it's just really dull. Like, if you listen to it, it has a few interesting bits, but then there's just a bunch of long stretches of nothing thrown in for good measure. But what really grinds my gears is the Godzilla theme. In the King of the Monsters soundtrack, for the first time in any American-made Godzilla movie, they used the classic Akira Ifukube Godzilla theme. The low brass part is a recurring theme throughout the movie. And the second string-based part also plays several times. It's music that I already love, but Bear also made superb arrangements of them. And I didn't necessarily expect GVK to use the original theme. Again, Warner Brothers probably wouldn't want to pay the fee, and they don't really have to. You can have a good Godzilla soundtrack without that theme. I love Takayuki Hattori's and especially Michiru Oshima's music. But instead of making his own theme, or just reusing the Ifukube theme, Tom decided to just make a dollar store version of the classic theme. It's different enough to not be actionable, but it's just a worse version of the old theme. And not even the whole thing, just the big low brass part. There's a quote from Adam Wingard, the director, saying how he didn't want to use the original theme because he thought it felt insincere. And I don't necessarily agree with his reasoning, but I'm fine with them not using it. But if you're worried about insincerity, how is this better? As I said, you can make a great Godzilla movie without any influence from Ifukube. Now, GVK is a sequel to one of them. 2014 has an amazing score, and it doesn't use anything even close to the classic theme. I don't know why they couldn't just make something good for this one. It kinda works in the fast-paced action scenes, but the only usage of this Godzilla theme that I really like is during the opening credits. And that's mostly because it goes all in on the synth and it actually has energy. It's up-tempo, it's kind of fun. It makes the theme actually sound unique. But it only lasts for like a minute and a half, and even then, the opening credits aren't even on the official release of the soundtrack, which I'll get back to. And also, if you were gonna use the Ifukube theme for anything, you'd think it would be for GVK, since it's a remake of the movie where that theme originated. Again, I don't think they needed to use the old theme, but they should have done something different than what they did. But also, how cool would it have been to get a modernized version of the original King Kong vs. Godzilla theme? That theme gets referenced all the time for some reason, but not here. And then you get to the MechaGodzilla theme, which is just the new Godzilla theme with the low brass switched out for synth choir. It's not like they try to hide it, they play them back to back during their beam clash. And I think that's a pretty cool idea that they haven't really done before with MechaGodzilla. It reminds me of the Spider-Man Homecoming soundtrack, where the Vulture is repurposing a discarded Avengers technology, so his theme is basically the Avengers theme reworked in the minor key. However, Godzilla and MechaGodzilla are only really superficially similar characters in this movie, so there's no real point to them having the same theme. If anything, you'd think MechaGodzilla's theme would be more similar to Ghidorah's theme than anything else, given that his head is stuffed up MechaGodzilla's ass. And I guess Ghidorah's theme is somewhat choir-based, but not at all in the same way that MechaGodzilla's is. As I said, MechaGodzilla's theme is synth choir, while Ghidorah's theme is more chanting than anything else.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
It's not like there aren't a lot of directions to go or past material to work with MechaGodzilla. There's the high brass fanfare of the Millennium series, there's the bassy percussion sound of Heisei. Hell, do the show of jazz again, just not this. And I'd also like to mention that the official release of the soundtrack is organized very poorly. Even if you ignore that it's missing the opening credits, the best part of the soundtrack, some of the track titles are also baffling. For instance, the first track is the new Godzilla theme and is titled Pensacola, Florida, and I don't understand why. Not only is Godzilla in Pensacola for less than 5 minutes, so there's no reason to name the whole damn theme after that, but it's also not the music that plays when he's destroying Pensacola. We'll get back to that one. Second track is Skull Island, which is Kong's theme. Makes sense. Apex Cybernetics is the music that plays when Godzilla is destroying Pensacola's Apex facility. Except it's mostly incomplete. Also, you'd think this track would be Pensacola, Florida, and Apex Cybernetics would be the music for when Apex is introduced, but no. The latter isn't even on the soundtrack. A new language is what plays when Kong demonstrates sign language, which makes some amount of sense, but also we skipped a bunch of stuff to get here. Just Now is what plays when the Godzilla gang fully get together to storm Apex. Did they ever say just now at any point in their conversation? I don't think so. Tasman Sea. Godzilla and Kong fight in the Tasman Sea. Cool. Through There plays when Kong is airlifted to Antarctica, and I don't really get that name either. Is it a pun on Through the Air? Is it a line of dialogue in the scene? If it is, it's so minor that you probably shouldn't have named the track that. Antarctica. Kong's in Antarctica. Hollow Earth. Kong's in Hollow Earth and finds the ancient cave and claims his axe. Once more, we've skipped a good amount of stuff. The Throne. Kong claims his throne and everyone starts exploring of it. And then you get to lunch. I'm guessing that this is when Kong fights the war bats and bites a good chunk out of their brains.
Was that the bite of 87?
But that sequence is only a small portion of the track. Also, this is way out of order. This should have been between Antarctica and Hollow Earth. Nuclear Blast is when Godzilla lands in Hong Kong and Kong places his axe on the ancient Godzilla art. But the Royal Axe is what plays when Godzilla blasts the hole down from Hong Kong to King Kong. And I think that might have been a mistake. These two tracks probably should have switched titles. They make much more sense that way, since Kong is using his axe in Nuclear Blast and Godzilla causes a nuclear blast in the Royal Axe. But the last two tracks are what bother me the most. Mega is the track that plays when Kong fights Godzilla in Hong Kong. What does Mega mean? I don't know. It's also 8 minutes long, which isn't necessarily bad, but it absolutely could have been split up into multiple tracks. And even beyond that, it sometimes feels like the music doesn't even match up with what's happening on screen. Like, the movie is very basic. The movie is very biased in favor of Kong, yet when Kong finally gets the upper hand in the battle, the music would lead you to believe that that's a bad thing. There's a lot of moments during this sequence where the music is just gone. If you listen to the soundtrack, there's music that's clearly supposed to go along with the scene, but it's muted for whatever reason. For instance, take this moment at the end of round 3 where Godzilla goes, for lack of a better term, crocodile mode. Here's how it sounds in the movie. And here's that same clip with the soundtrack unmuted. It's not a super big deal, I just find it weird. And I will say I do like the percussive accents on the Godzilla theme during this part. But the last track plays from when MechaGodzilla joins the fight almost until the very end of the movie, which I'd like to mention is absurdly long. That's almost 14 straight minutes of music that absolutely could have and should have been split up. Anyway, what do you think is the name of the track that plays when Godzilla and Kong tag team MechaGodzilla? Maybe something basic like The Final Confrontation. Wrong, it's called Hong Kong. The location they've been in for the last 45 fucking minutes, and has very little, if any, significance to this specific battle. And what pisses me off the most about this track is that it's actually pretty decent all the way through, which is a rarity in this soundtrack. It's fun, but not only is it way too long, but it's also only available to buy digitally if you buy the whole album. The rest of the album is really boring, and you have to buy the whole damn thing just to get one track that's kind of okay. You know what, fuck this. I'm sick of talking about something that clearly didn't have any effort put into it. I want to talk about the King of the Monsters soundtrack. I already mentioned that there's an awesome rendition of the original Godzilla theme, but Bear also did a new arrangement of Yuji Koseki's Mothra theme, and it's beautiful. And beyond those two reused themes, there's also plenty of amazing new material, such as Ghidorah and Rodan's themes. Most giant monster soundtracks try to emphasize the scale and power of the monsters. They're usually pretty versatile, case in point being Godzilla's theme being used as both a villain and hero theme with ease. However, Bear's Ghidorah theme doesn't just sound powerful, it sounds downright sinister. It sounds like such a minor detail, but it really makes it stand out amongst the pantheon of kaiju themes. I especially enjoy the version exclusive to the soundtrack. It starts off pretty quiet with just chanting choirs and solo strings, but eventually builds up to sounding super powerful. One of my other favorite parts is when Ghidorah's first awakened. The first you see of him is one of his rattlesnake-esque tails before a gradual reveal of all three heads, and if you listen to the soundtrack you can hear some kabasa mixed in the back. And Rodan's theme incorporates a lot of really interesting percussion sounds, like there's a lot of bongos and what I assume are claves, maybe? It's super high energy, and I'm so upset that a lot of it had to be cut down to fit the scene. Like, just listen to it. It may very well be my favorite track, but it's like picking my favorite child. Also, I love Rodan, if it wasn't obvious. And getting back to Godzilla himself, he still gets a brand new theme for the movie. Kind of. He doesn't label it as the Godzilla theme anywhere officially, it's just what I like to call it, although you could argue it also represents the Titans' connection to humanity. Because it plays when they're exploring Godzilla's prehistoric bachelor pad, and when Emma's explaining her master plan to use the Titans to save the world from being destroyed by humans.
We have a call on the emergency channel.
Sorry.
I come to make an announcement. Shadow the Hedgehog's a bitch-ass motherfucker.
However, my favorite usage of the theme is how it sort of bookends the movie. At the beginning, when Mark and Emma are looking for their son in the wreckage of San Francisco, it starts blaring when Godzilla reveals himself. the very end, once Ghidorah is defeated, Boston is leveled, and Mark and Emma have both reached the ends of their arcs, it plays when Godzilla is crowned the new king of the monsters. And I won't even get into how amazing the rest of the soundtrack is, but the track called Goodbye, Old Friend is just... ooh! But the main thing that separates the King of the Monsters soundtrack from GVK's is that the King of the Monsters soundtrack actually helps to tell the story. It expands on it. It exists to service the narrative. The GVK soundtrack is there because it would feel like that one trailer for the Tom Cruise Mummy movie without it. It adds very little to the movie. It has its moments, but by and large, it's very forgettable. I can only hope that Tom Holkenborg can pull it together for the new Empire. But just to end on a positive note, I'd like to go over some of the few things that GVK does well. The most obvious strength of the movie is the monster fights. Ignoring the fact that they don't make much, if any, sense in context, these fights go hard as hell. I mentioned course correcting earlier, and I will say this is the only good course correction. A prime complaint of both 2014 and King of the Monsters was that too much of the action was obscured either by darkness, storm effects, or the humans. None of it really bothered me too much, but the fights in GVK look and feel truly spectacular. They fight at night, in the morning, at dusk, in neon-lit Hong Kong. It's all eye candy. And the choreography of the fights is also stellar. I especially love the reference to the original King Kong vs. Godzilla, where instead of shoving a tree in Godzilla's mouth, Kong rams the butt of his axe in Godzilla's mouth to block his atomic breath. I also think it's funny how after Kong is disarmed and goes on the defensive, Godzilla just spams the atomic breath. He lands like one shot on Kong. I also like Godzilla going crocodile mode, as well as how effortlessly he destroys the fleet. And any fight involving MechaGodzilla was impeccable. He just has so many cool abilities. My personal favorite are his weird energy punches and kicks. They feel very Ultraman to me. And I also appreciate that they kind of recreate the Godzilla against MechaGodzilla poster in the middle of the battle. I'm not entirely sure if it was intentional, but I think it's really fun. Although I will say it's very telling that one of the best parts about Godzilla vs. Kong is the bit where MechaGodzilla literally and figuratively mops the floor with Godzilla's ass. And I just want to say that I don't think GVK is the worst movie ever made. Hell, it's not even the worst Godzilla movie ever made. I'd much sooner rewatch this than All Monsters Attack, Godzilla 98, Final Wars, or even Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Godzilla vs. Hedorah isn't that bad, I just don't like it. GVK is just incredibly disappointing to me. It set out to be a mindless action movie, which isn't what I wanted at all, but I can't say it didn't succeed in what it wanted to be. And I just want to say, if you like this movie, that's great. Please don't let me take that away from you. I love King of the Monsters, but many people don't. I respect those people, but I disagree wholeheartedly. As I said about his theme, Godzilla himself is a very malleable character. Regardless of who you are, there's a version of him that can appeal to you. Whether you want him to be an allegory for nuclear war, a cheesy superhero for kids, an ancient protector of nature, an abomination against God, an amalgamation of everyone killed in World War II, whatever the fuck was happening in Singular Point, a big dinosaur, or just a funny little guy. There's something for everyone, and Godzilla vs. Kong just isn't for me. I can only hope Godzilla x Kong The New Empire is better than GVK, but at the very least, I have a better idea of where to set my expectations than I did 3 years ago.